Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier, and I'm here with you today to talk about a very important issue. Because we have been wondering since January 20th, and we have been asking since January 20th, what is the Biden-Harris administration's policy, both on the Middle East and the domestic policy as well? There has been no clear answer to this. And we hope today to try to give you somewhat of an answer based on the most recent developments that we have seen. But before we get started, we do want to mention if this is the first time that you are seeing the program, we thank you and we welcome you here. We want you to know that we do long-form political commentary, and every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We go on to Facebook, Twitter, DLive, YouTube, all social media that the internet overlords will allow to reach out to you to hear your comments and your thoughts and your phone calls about the issues that are affecting us from anywhere in the world. Every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we are live because we believe in the First Amendment and the expression of free speech, and we want to share that with the world and with you. And we look forward to hearing from you every Sunday, Eastern Standard Time at 2:30 p.m. for that. But let's focus on what's happening right now in the United States. What's going on? And we want to try and give you an idea how best we could possibly say this. For many Americans, they shun politics. They shun international news. They don't really see what's going on because most Americans prefer to be entertained. So if we were to take and try and visualize the Biden-Harris administration's policy, especially their Middle East policy, their international policy, we would probably be able to show you it would be something like this.
Fancy Moses.
Yes, the Biden-Harris policy is a joke. It's embarrassing. It's painful to watch as it jerks around and doesn't seem to be right. You know what it's supposed to be, but it's not quite correct. Now, that's a very big allegation, very big statement to make. How can we say that? Well, let's take a look at what it has accomplished. Since January 20th, the Biden-Harris administration have been moving towards greater and greater gun control. They have tried to establish a national red flag law. They have been trying to put pressure on legal gun owners. They've done all of this because they say that that is the root cause of violence in the United States, that this is the problem that we're seeing. Well, how has that worked out for the United States? Over the July 4th holiday weekend, we saw that there were 100 people shot, 18 people killed in Chicago alone. In just Chicago, 100 people were shot, 18 fatally. This is from ABC News in Chicago. Going to CNN and looking at CNN, they report that 150 people were fatally shot and more than 400 people were, 150 people were killed and 400 people fatally shot. 150 people killed, 400 people shot in the United States over the July 4th weekend. That just looking at New York State, New York City, there were 12 shootings and 13 victims. There were in the state 26 victims and 21 shootings just over this weekend. In fact, looking at New York State, over the last year, there has been a 40% increase in the violence versus 2020, with 767 shootings and 885 victims. That is an insane amount of increase. And Chicago, as we just saw, is no better off. This is a problem. This is the result of the Biden administration. Their efforts for gun control don't affect criminals. They don't affect the criminally insane. They have not stopped anyone. The red flag laws have failed. We have seen that in Colorado. It fails. And yet, this is the Biden administration's herk and jerk, kind of like what we saw with Elaine in her herky-jerky movements, trying to be some kind of dance. It's just a false image. And this is coupled with the Democratic leadership's goal of defunding police. And we've seen a result from that as well. Because defunding the police, as reported by CBS News, San Francisco is grappling with drastic drops in police recruits. That they are currently short 400 officers in San Francisco. And the shortage has increased from 2012 to now 18% in 2021. Now, this is horrible because the city itself, the people of the residents of San Francisco, by a 3-1 margin, as reported by CBS News, want more cops. They say, and the police chief of San Francisco stated, we need more cops on the streets. Polls say that 8 in 10 residents think crime has gotten worse. The problem is very clear. And when you look at this, you see, on Monday, July 5th, looters ransacked San Francisco's Neiman Marcus in broad daylight while being videoed. We see this. It's clear. This problem comes from the fact that there are 400 less officers, so it takes longer for them to get to the scene to try and protect anyone. And they know that we have seen, as part of the defund police movement, there has also been the reform, the bail reform movement, which allows these criminals to be released back into the public to commit more crimes. We have seen that in New York State, California, in Seattle, and Washington. We've seen it across the nation. Now, you may say, well, Mike, you're talking about international policy, you're talking about the world. What does what we've seen here have to do with the Middle East? Because it's the same policy. It's the same distraction. It is the same failure of leadership. When we look at Google Trends, looking at this most recently, you'll see that looking for the search term Afghanistan has been mostly ignored by the major news media and the public. And in fact, what we do see is that it is the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., and Virginia that are paying the most attention to what's going on in Afghanistan. Our political leaders are completely aware that there is a growing problem that has not been addressed. In fact, most major news media won't even touch this. When we spoke on January 22nd about the increase of troops in Syria, that the Biden administration had ordered troops to go from Iraq into Syria, increasing the exposure of U.S. troops to the Syrian civil war and to destabilize the Middle East, the rest of the media said, well, it wasn't really true and not to worry about it, and they ignored the story. That led to June 21st, when we were talking about whether or not the BidenHarris administration had already lost the Middle East. On June 21st, when we were talking about how Iran was backing Hamas in its attempt to kill innocent civilians in Israel, how the Biden administration had funded Hamas with $75 million that allowed them to buy 4,000 Iranian rockets to attack innocent women and children in Israel. and that the United States was not involved in the peace talks to end the Hamas-Israeli war that had taken place in early June. In fact, Egypt had to step forward. And that led us to wonder on June 28th, is war the Biden-Harris administration Middle East agenda? Because the news won't even talk about these things. We're talking about it. The major news media aren't. They've been ignoring this. They've been talking about President Trump. But they won't talk about Joe Biden. They won't talk about the Middle East policy. Think about what happened at the G7 summit, where Russia laughed at the United States, where there were reporters and members of the G7 laughing at Joe Biden because of his missteps, because he got lost. He couldn't follow conversations. He didn't know what room to be in. And then we even have the images of the president of France, Macron, as he scolds Joe Biden. This is how the world is interpreting things. And they know that the Middle East is falling apart. In fact, the Biden administration's policy, with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris at the lead, their best idea for Afghanistan is that the United States ran away in the middle of the night. And let me make this very clear, because you're not hearing this on the major news media. This is the AP News reporting on July 6th that the U.S. left an Afghan airfield at night and didn't tell the Afghan commander about this. The U.S. left Afghanistan's Bagram airfield after nearly 20 years by shutting off the electricity and slipping away in the night without notifying the base's new commander, Afghan commander, who had no idea. And this is not a major story in America. This isn't something that's being discussed much in America. But it is having an impact because the Afghani people, they're paying attention to it. And their thought was, and we have their quote here, the Afghan soldiers are stating, in one night, the United States lost all the goodwill of 20 years by leaving the way they did in the night without telling the Afghan soldiers who were outside patrolling the area. And this is a big deal because when the United States ran away, they left 3.5 million items. Now, it's been said, and the United States has tried to diminish this, saying these were very small items like phones and doorknobs. But what it also happened to include were thousands of civilian vehicles and hundreds of armored vehicles. Armored vehicles. In fact, the 3.5 million items also included small weapons and ammunition for those small weapons. The Biden administration's plan was run away, don't tell anyone, and leave food and vehicles and armored vehicles and weapons to be taken by the Taliban and ISIS and Al-Qaeda. This is a big deal. And this isn't being told to the American people. This happened on July 2nd. July 2nd. Under the Biden-Harris administration, the United States government, military, ran away and left food, vehicles, armored vehicles, and weapons for anyone to come and take. And that's exactly what happened. Because not only did Afghani people come in and just loot everything, well, ISIS and Al-Qaeda stepped in and they too got something out of the deal. They looted as well. And they got armored vehicles. This is what they were able to get. That's a tank. As reported by The Sun, July 6th. This is being reported by The Sun on July 6th that the Al-Qaeda and ISIS and the Taliban were able to receive armored tanks. So when they say armored vehicles, as we saw, when they're saying, well, we left behind armored vehicles, we also left behind tanks. And this is a big deal. This is a problem that will not end. And because we left in the middle of the night on July 2nd under the direction of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, what happened is the actual people there to help the Afghani people, the Afghan troops themselves, are doing the exact same thing that we see in every city that has defunded the police in the United States. They left. As reported by the Times of India, we see that 1,000 Afghan soldiers retreated to Tajikistan because of what's happening with the United States in their country. As many as 1,037 Afghan troops retreated to Tajikistan following clashes with Taliban militants. They're running away. They're leaving. And we're seeing that the Taliban is stepping into that vacuum, and just like an autonomous zone in the United States, just like the violence that we see in Chicago and in San Francisco, the Taliban is taking power. And it's important to note that these Afghani troops, many of them are running to Russia. They're leaving their homeland, and Tajikistan is part of what the United States calls Russia, otherwise known as the Commonwealth of Independent States, or the CIS, which is the former Soviet Union. This is run by Vladimir Putin, the man who laughs in the face of Joe Biden and has done so for several months. This is also creating a problem for immigration for the United States and the rest of the world. As Info Migrants notes on July 5th, not reported in the United States, because of the retreat of the United States and therefore NATO forces, we see that in Germany, there are some 1,100 troops that are stationed in Afghanistan. They will be retreating, and they will be taking into their country somewhere around 3,400 of individuals that worked with the German government in Afghanistan. Already 520 Afghans and their families have resettled as immigrants into Germany out of Afghanistan because their lives were in danger. In England, the United Kingdom had 750 troops on their NATO mission in Afghanistan, and they are going to be taking 7,000 Afghan staff members into their nation. 7,000. Now, this is important because the United States has 2,500 troops. That's double the number of troops in Afghanistan than Germany. That's 3 times as many troops as the United Kingdom, our allies. And the United States, because of this, is going to be taking on between 20,000 and 100,000 Afghan citizens as migrants into the United States. In fact, we know that due to the deteriorating situation, the growth of the Taliban, Al-Qaeda, and ISIS in Afghanistan, and the destabilization of the Middle East, Joe Biden announced on June 24th that they would be flying applicants to make sure that they would be able to take in as many as 50,000 Afghanis, 9,000 of them being interpreters and 41,000 of them being their family members. These people have to run away because they supported the United States. And as the United States is running away in the middle of the night without notification to anyone, leaving an insane vacuum of power and enabling the the funding and the equipping of the Taliban, ISIS, and Al Qaeda with small arms and tanks, these people are terrified for their lives. These Afghanis are running, and it will take them 2 years to be able to be allowed to get into the United States. This is a problem. And while the United States government, while the United States media won't even address this, the rest of the world is. We see in the July 5th editorial by the Guardian newspaper, the Guardian view on Afghanistan withdrawal, a retreat into uncertainty, that Joe Biden's actions are making things more difficult, more destabilized in the Middle East, especially also including with Pakistan, a sometimes ally of the United States. And it is noted that the Pakistan army is Pakistan is an army with a country attached. Imran Khan serves as the prime minister, but it's the chief of staff of the army, General Qamar Bagwan, who actually calls all the shots. Even so, we have to take into account that even so, Washington had wanted to pressure Pakistan into granting the CIA a base in Pakistan to launch drone strikes against the Taliban, because the United States, under the Biden administration, much like under the Obama administration, understood that the area, the region, was destabilized, that the Taliban was not going away because they didn't finish the mission. They had not removed Al Qaeda or ISIS. And so they needed to go in with drones and attack. The U.S. was kicked out of Pakistan in 2011. Last month, the Pakistani Prime Minister, Mr. Khan, wrote an op-ed quashing the idea that the U.S. could regain a military foothold in the country. In other words, Pakistan directly told the Biden-Harris administration that just like the Obama administration, they do not respect them, they do not fear them, and they will not work with them to defeat ISIS, Al Qaeda, and Taliban. That they are not going to be looking to the United States and helping them in any way. The Biden-Harris administration failed. And this is not being reported in the United States, but it is being reported around the rest of the world. Now, if we were to go to the RT Times, it's very important because we see that on July 5th, they happen to note that not only is the United Kingdom going to be leaving a few troops left over, the SAS, but more important than that is a conversation that came from their former intelligence agent. And we're talking about the MI6. The MI6 is the equivalent of the CIA. And Britain's Secret Intelligence Service, their former head, Alex Yanger, was speaking to Sky News on Sunday, July 4th. And in that conversation, he stated that with the vacuum of power, Al Qaeda and ISIS are there and they are growing. He states, quote, "They're on the back foot, but it would be wrong, patently, to claim that they have gone away and they have the capacity to regenerate. ISIS and Al Qaeda are not gone. They haven't been fully defeated. And in the power vacuum that is being created by the Biden-Harris administration, disappearing in the middle of the night, not informing the Afghan government or even the Afghan military of our departure, allowing the Taliban and ISIS and Al Qaeda to gain tanks and small arms and food that they need to continue to fight and to get a resurgence, this is a problem." And that same former MIA director, their service head, Alex Yanger, goes on to say I've learned the idea that we can create a democracy in our image in Afghanistan, in a country like Afghanistan, like that is out of reach. And that is because we have failed in our process. We have failed in the way that we have approached this, from the Obama administration to today with the BidenHarris administration. There is no strength in running away. That does not impress Russia or China or North Korea or any nation that dislikes and hates the United States. Iran, which has promised to kill every single American, whether they're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, and whether they don't pay attention to the news at all, Iran has said they will kill everyone. They are the leading sponsor of global terror in the world. They have gone and supported Hamas, which then wanted to kill Israeli citizens, women and children with rockets, 4,000 rockets, and the United States did nothing. That was a signal. We see that the United States on July 2nd ran away in the middle of the night and destroyed 2 decades of influence and support and goodwill instantly. And the Taliban is moving in, taking the tanks, taking the weapons, taking the food, and growing its power. And Pakistan, having to choose between the United States that is willing to run away and abandon 2 decades of effort, and choosing between them and the Taliban, which are on their doorstep, now armed with tanks and weapons and food, decides to abandon and reject the Biden-Harris administration to support, or to at least try and mitigate, what's happening on their doorstep. The United States media is not telling you what's going on. They're not addressing this issue. Washington, D.C. is paying attention. D.C. is aware that Afghanistan is falling apart, that there is a power vacuum. Across the nation, everyone is aware that violent crime is up, that gun violence is escalating as police are being defunded. And the Biden administration is bumbling along saying, don't worry, everything's fine. And that they have a plan. And no one knows what that plan is. And all of the symptoms of that plan are failing. This should trouble you. But if it does not, if you believe that we have missed some information, that we have misunderstood the news reports that we are finding from across the world, if you think we have misunderstood that, please leave us a comment. Tell us what we have missed. Please explain if you understand that the Biden-Harris international policy is different than we have described. Please tell us why. We wish to know. The world wants to know. Now, if you found this to be informative, if you've liked it, please like and share. But most of all, please do subscribe. It helps us to spread this expression of free speech and the press that most of the world does not get to enjoy, and we have seen being suppressed by the internet overlords. Please do subscribe, and please do join us every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time when we go live to talk with you and hear what you have to say about these important things happening across the world. We thank you, and we hope you'll be well.